Good afternoon to you. 407 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Becket Adams will be with us this hour. We'll talk about Lady McBiden and her role in clinging to the presidency. And then Matthew Foldy is here as Democrats are fighting amongst themselves. Couldn't happen to a better party. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Let's see. I'm going to take a phone call real fast. This is Edward in Midland, Virginia, line 4. Edward, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Love your show.
Thanks, sir.
I just wanted to point out that they're not that sneaky. There was an email that said that 10% for the big guy, and now all of a sudden Biden's going to have a big boy meeting.
Uh-huh.
This is kind of synonymous.
So the big boy press briefing on Thursday that he's set to hold, you're saying this is the big guy press briefing in your view?
Right.
I love
exactly.
it. I love it. I hope people start calling it that, not just Edward. Thank you, Edward. Good idea. The big guy press briefing that Biden is set to give, the press conference on Thursday. That's going to be a disaster. Let's just forecast ahead of time. And everywhere he goes in that room will be a landmine because the press has turned against him. Unless, of course, Obama calls in some favors tonight and suddenly the press is once again compliant and servile come Thursday. We'll see what happens. Anything could happen. Let's see. All right. Now to Brianna Lyman we go. The elections correspondent for the Federalist joins us as Democrats this week are fighting to allow non-citizens to vote in our elections. Brianna, good to have you with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Vin.
The SAVE Act was contemplated by Congress this week, and Democrats all came out against it to include the White House. Give us a sense of why. Why are Democrats just so against verifying that American citizens are the only ones voting in our elections?
Yeah, because Democrats benefit from loose election security laws. Not to say that they're encouraging non-citizens illegals to vote, but tightening up those restrictions undoubtedly hurt them. You look to a place like California in 2018 where 1,500 non-citizens were accidentally registered to vote. And it wasn't until a local man, a Canadian man, went to the press and said, hey, they're not listening to me, but this is what's happening, that it actually got any sort of publicity.
Yeah.
And what Democrats are arguing right now with the SAVE Act is that it's unnecessary because it's already illegal to be a non-citizen vote. Well, it's also illegal to murder someone, but that hasn't stopped murders, right?
No.
And the thing that's standing between our free and fair elections right now, Vince, is a little check mark box on the application form where you have to basically use the honor system and say, I promise I'm not lying, I'm a citizen.
Yes, and how much intensive auditing is there of any given election to make sure that everyone who is involved was actually allowed to vote?
That's a great question. I'll point you to North Carolina. So, for instance, North Carolina had a problem where their registration form didn't actually say that that was a required box to include, for instance, your Social Security number or your driver's license ID, which is what a state uses through HAVA to actually attempt to verify citizenship, right? It's not a guarantee, but it's an attempt. And unfortunately, when the state ended up fixing their voter registration form a few months ago, they still haven't kicked off the voters that are on their rolls who have not yet provided a Social Security number or a driver's license ID. And so when Democrats tell us this week that there's no reason for the SAVE Act, the mechanisms in place right now are essentially toothless and or flawed and ineffective.
So have you seen any polling? I keep getting calls and messages from people who suggest the following. Why don't Republicans urge that polling places have signage up that say it is a violation of the law for a non-citizen to vote in American elections? That does seem like a good and useful way to convey that there are penalties for this, or there should be.
Absolutely, and I'm sure Democrats would try to say that's some type of intimidation, especially when you look at the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which Democrats have been trying to shove through Congress, and it would essentially allow the Department of Justice to step in local and state elections when someone sues. And make no mistake, a left-wing organization, Mark Elias, they would absolutely sue and say that that's voter intimidation. That way, the Department of Justice would then have the ability to take over the election.
There's now at least 10 million new illegal immigrants in the country, illegal aliens, and we've heard estimates upwards of, say, 30 million illegal aliens in the country. The reality is that nobody quite knows how many are here. As a result, though, if states are just sending out ballots or registering people to vote to just random people, regardless of whether they're citizens or not, they don't actually have to vote for that many vulnerable ballots to be out there and to be misused, right?
Right, and that's one of the problems with, for instance, in New York, you have they automatically will send you an absentee ballot. I got one in 2020 when I didn't request one, and I went and voted in person regardless. But imagine someone would have gotten my mail and filled out that form for me and voted the way I wouldn't have voted, or even voted for the way I would have. It's still inappropriate. Individuals, when there's this many ballots floating around, it's not safe for an election.
Yes.
And unfortunately, Democrats don't see that as a problem.
It wasn't that long ago that Jimmy Carter was a part of an election integrity report, a bipartisan report that concluded that we need paper ballots, we need voter ID, we need secure elections. The Democrats have definitely changed that view over the course of 2 short decades pretty aggressively, Brianna Lyman. And it kind of goes to the point that you made at the outset, which is they are confident that an unsecure election is to their benefit.
It is. Here's a great example. If you go to Arizona, Arizona is the only state in which there are 2 separate forms. You can register with a state form in which you have to provide documentary proof of citizenship. If you can't provide that proof of citizenship, you are required, because Biden's Department of Justice stepped in and sued them, to then give that applicant a federal registration form where they don't have to provide actual proof of their citizenship. And if you look in 2018, about 1,700 people used a federal-only ballot. So perhaps some of those people, if not all of them, couldn't provide documentary proof. Do you know in 2020, 11,600 people used a federal-only ballot in a state that Joe Biden won by 10,457 votes, right? There are glaring questions that deserve to be answered. If the left wants to say we support free and fair elections, then let us know that they're free and fair.
Yeah, why would you go in and opt not to vote in the elections that you're supposed to have, some say over in your state? If you're taking a federal-only ballot, that certainly raises some eyebrows, definitely mine. Brianna, one of the other pieces here is that when the Biden administration began, Joe Biden put out an executive order, or somebody did in his name, ordering all of the federal agencies to register people to vote in the United States. In other words, they're using the federal government as an attempt to register Democrats to keep Biden in power. What do we know about that effort, and what has been revealed, if anything?
Yeah, this is really dangerous. This is part of Biden bucks. And one of the ways that Democrats are essentially trying to turn the election in their favor is not only using campaign donations, but taxpayer dollars. And they work with, for instance, universities. And universities will then allow their students to get paid by a federal work study program to register voters. And if you look at data, young college students voted 2-1 for Democrats during the 2022 midterm. So we know that when you allow college students to do registration and you're paying for that activity on campuses, you're turning out more Democratic voters than you are Republican. And that is part of their effort to turn the tide.
And one of the ironies here is that you're talking about the college population, which is exactly the types of people they would want to focus on in order to keep Biden and his party in power. But one of the realities here, according to polling, is that among unregistered American citizens who are eligible to vote, they just haven't registered, a majority of them support Trump, which means that Republicans would do well to register more Americans to actually vote. But instead, what's happening here is Democrats are not targeting those people. They're targeting only the types of people who they think are going to vote for Democrats.
Absolutely. And this isn't just a Democrat problem. You bring up a great point. Republicans are also down behind the 8 ball, I'll say. And what I mean by that is if you look at that New York Times Siena poll that came out, and I think it was May, it's on that Donald Trump leads Biden among registered and likely voters, but his lead shrinks among likely voters, i.e. there are registered Republicans out there and non-registered Republicans who want to vote, but they don't know how to get involved. Maybe they do need an absentee ballot. Maybe they do need to be registered. And the RNC, at least as of, a few weeks ago, they did not have a significant on-the-ground operation in places like Pennsylvania, where we see a lot of people saying, I want to vote, I want to get registered, but I'm not sure what to do. It's really grassroots who are doing this. So Democrats are playing a game, and Republicans not only are not playing that game, they're not even playing their own game.
Interesting. All right, and concerning. All right, let me ask you about the use of the democracy language by the left. I talk about this a lot on our program, and you've written about it this week for the Federalist. Democrats are consolidating absolute power in the name of democracy. Give us a rundown of what you're talking about here.
Yeah, this is great. The party of democracy is doing everything the opposite of what a democracy is, mind you, in our constitutional republic. And I think the biggest example of that is what's happening with Joe Biden, the push to have him step down. Democrats prevented a real primary from happening. Dean Phillips was essentially shut down by other members of the Democratic Congressional Caucus for raising the issues that are now all over the media, right? That Biden is not mentally or physically fit. And for instance, in Florida, they just canceled the primary, right? They gave all their votes to Biden, so there was no real primary. It hurt them down ballot in local races. And what Democrats are now doing is they're realizing by keeping Biden as the nominee, they're hurting their chances. And so they want to tell all the primary voters who went out and voted for Biden like they were told to do that they can go kick rocks because a group of elites in D.C. know better.
Right. So they went through the motions of voting in a rigged primary, and now they're being told that those votes were irrelevant to begin with. And this party suggests that these are the defenders of democracy.
Exactly, and it's really unfortunate because in a real democracy, and this is why I don't think Biden should simply step down. If Biden's stepping down, he must be stepping down as the nominee and the president. If he's just stepping down as the nominee, that is a subversion of the will of the people, aka what Democrats should be referring to when they say democracy. And I think Joe Biden sees that for what it is. I think his family does because they want him to stay in power for whatever their intentions are. But Democrats, their end game is winning, and they will do whatever it takes. It's why they're willing to use lawfare to throw their opponents in jail. It's why they're willing to censor anyone who goes against the government narrative, because their end game is to win.
Yes, and you also write this week that it's also why they've been attempting to kick their opponents off of ballots. That includes people like, of course, President Trump, as well as RFK Jr.
Absolutely. And not only are they attempting to kick them off the ballots, they're also putting in jail people who go against the grain. Look, Donald Trump was lucky. He's avoiding jail sentencing this go around, but September might be different. Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, we cannot take our foot off the pedal. 15 Democrats are defying congressional subpoenas and are walking free today. Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon should be walking free as well, but they're not because Democrats are willing to play hardball and Republicans want to play wiffle ball.
Yeah, and Democrats are willing to destroy lives in order to hold on to power. Brianna Lyman with the Federalist, thank you very much. Always nice to talk to you.
Thanks so much, Vince.
That's Brianna Lyman, and excellent work over at the Federalist, but a couple of great pieces this week on what's really going on here with election integrity, the left's attempts to destroy that, and also the reality behind all of this pro-democracy language, which has always been garbage. She's right, too. That, have you noticed that they don't actually use the phrase the will of the people? They're never once attempting to defend the will of the people. That's not their priority. Also, one of the things that we should look out for, you'll recognize it instantly, though, when you start hearing all of this chatter this week about throwing Biden out. They keep saying, the left, that is, they keep saying that their priority is beating Donald Trump. Our only priority, they will tell you, is beating Donald Trump. Now, that doesn't sound like the language of an American political party that has any respect whatsoever for, quote, democracy, or more importantly, our constitutional republic. Because a political party, if they were conveying anything, what should their number one priority be? Their number one priority should be making sure to look after the United States of America, to heed the voters, to respect their will. That's the number one priority. That's not what they're saying. They're not even bothering with the voters here. Just today, we're hearing Democrats saying, our top priority is just make Hakeem Jeffries the Speaker of the House and defeat Donald Trump. That's it. That's all they care about. There's not a single breath spared on the well-being of the American people. Not for a moment. Because to them, this is a power equation. Very simply. And if they don't have it, that's when it's a crisis. It's 4:20 now. Coming up here in a few minutes, we're going to be joined by Becket Adams, who's done some excellent reporting on the First Lady of the United States, Dr. Jill Biden, Ed D. Did you know that she has her own Hail to the Chief music? Did you know this? Yeah, Becket Adams reported on this. Apparently, the Biden White House, somebody, I assume it was Jill, demanded that the president's own Marine Corps band come up with new walk-up music just for Jill. So we've got Hail to the Chief. Apparently the Marine band came up with something at her orders for her. I don't know how frequently they've used it. I guess it was used on at least one occasion. Reportedly, it's been retired. I guess people had noticed, like, hey, wait a second. Why do we have First Lady music? When did that happen? It's a great question. But so we'll talk to Becket Adams about this coming up, that one of the many oddities of the Biden administration is that they literally cooked up a Hail to the First Lady song, which is wild. We have the music, right? Oh, yeah, here it is. You want to hear this intro music? This is the music that they cooked up for Jill Biden to walk up into. And this was played in October of 2021. So as soon as she got her grubby little hands on power, she instantly was like, I need music just for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, the First Lady of the United States, Jill Biden, accompanied by the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, and the 2020 and 2021 National Teachers of the Year, Tabitha Rosproy and Juliana Urtubey.
That's peppy. Some horns. You really thought that sounded like the Benny Hill theme? Little yakety sax? A little bit. Somebody said it sounded like a Sunday morning show or something. Like, settle in for Jill Biden Sunday mornings. Yakety sax. We'll compare. I'll play it on the break. We'll see. Maybe I'll play it on the air. Ahead, we'll talk to Becket Adams about Lady McBiden and her latest grasp at power. She's holding on for dear life. Well, good afternoon to you. It's 4:35 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Matthew Foldy will join us, editor-in-chief of the Washington Reporter. You can talk to us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. This is news to me. I didn't even realize this had happened. Jill Biden has her own walk-up music that the White House apparently ordered the Marine Band to come up with. And as a reminder, I just played it for you. Again, this is what it sounds like.
Teachers of the Year, Tabitha Rosproy and Juliana Urtubey.
Now, on the break just now, on our news break, we were inundated with calls and emails from listeners who said this sounds exactly like the intro music to a show from 1965 all the way to 1967, 2 seasons, called F Troop. We've pulled up the F Troop intro, and that's what this sounds like. That's it. That's definitely it. There's no way it's anything else. That's the F Troop intro. So the Marine Corps Band with a deep cut in order to introduce the First Lady of the United States. For more on this, the man who's been breaking the news on this subject and so much more, Becket Adams joins us now. He's a columnist for National Review, the Washington Examiner, The Hill. He's also with the National Journalism Center. Becket, good to have you with us, sir.
Thanks. So great to be with you again, Vince.
So first and foremost, I had no idea that Jill Biden got her own intro music. Why did this happen? When did this happen?
Okay, so it's understandable because this was short-lived. The funny thing about this resurfacing is this is a story I wrote in 2022, and it was short-lived because it's one of those stories where it's a person who knew a person and wanted to tell and didn't really know. Eventually, it fell into my lap. It was one of these no fingerprint stories. Oh no, we want to tell the story. And so I did it, and it turned out that, yeah, she had her own walk-up music. The way the story was told, or the sources explained it, is that her office approached the band and said, no, they wanted a unique entrance song for her, and basically said, come up with one. The band was rushed, according to the source, and they did come up with this, and they performed it at least 2 White House functions where the First Lady was the headliner. And then shortly after I published my piece, which the First Lady's spokesperson vigorously denied. About a couple months later, I was again contacted by someone in the know who informed me that they had quietly retired the song because apparently the negative news coverage did not go over well.
Because people noticed that the Imperial First Lady had her own music, just like Hail to the Chief.
Right. So, they may have felt a little embarrassed. One source specifically said it was negative news coverage was the reason for quietly putting it away. So to your point, why you hadn't heard of this is a story or a song that had a lifespan of about maybe 2 months before it got shelved, partly because of writing about it. Now, it's one of those things that's just funny. When I wrote the story, it was kind of, when it came to me, no, this wasn't Watergate. It wasn't the biggest scandal. And it seemed to me amusing sort of human interest story, and I had a little bit of fun kind of researching it, finding source material, secondary confirmation, talking to outside experts like White House historian Tevi Troy, and, asking me, is this normal? Like, do First Ladies normally ask for this, et cetera, et cetera? And he said, no, by the way, that's not normal. It was the White House response from the First Lady's office actually kind of made it, the story went from amusing to kind of weird based on how sort of aggressively they pushed back on it. It was professional but aggressive, because you can't be too aggressive with someone who you're talking to. You don't want to write the story, but it was a level of denial that to me seemed incompatible, or at least not commensurate with how silly the story felt to me.
Well, there's a message in here for communications professionals in Washington on how to handle requests for comment like this. And the First Lady's office apparently screwed this up a big time. So you saw this. The F Troop comparison, have you ever heard that until now? Did you know that it sounded exactly like the F Troop theme?
I had not. This was actually today. As a friend of mine was actually shared the story because, we can get to this later, but in retrospect, the story doesn't seem so amusing. It now feels a little bit more like The Usual Suspects when Agent Kuyan looks at the corkboard and realizes all the goofy things he's been staring at actually point to a clue that was in front of you the whole time. So,
yes.
The First Lady kind of her office asking for this honorific doesn't seem so amusing now, considering where we are with Joe Biden and whatever's going on with his health. But to the point with her office, they flat denied it and said absolutely nothing about this is true. But what I can say, without revealing too much about my sources, I have them dead to rights. I have source materials. This 100% happened. So having them flat out deny something I know to be true is what made it feel pretty weird pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as F Troop, I hadn't actually heard F Troop till this morning. So that's a fun little spin on it.
Isn't that fun? And you kind of wonder, like, what was the MO? What was the thought process behind choosing that song? Because it sounds like it's exactly like that intro music. Again, but we'll see. Maybe your source will feed you more information on the subject. But the reason this is coming up, as you point out, Becket, is because at this moment there's a very Lady Macbeth vibe coming out of the White House that Jill Biden is desperately holding on to power. I've seen a lot of people compare her to Edith Wilson in the waning days of the Woodrow Wilson presidency, taking over, running the office of the presidency in her husband's failing health. This is all, really coming out. And then you get this big Vogue magazine cover that came out just after the debate, emphasizing that Jill Biden and is going to, the cover said something like, "We will decide our future" on Vogue. All of that adds up to, man, this woman really wants to hold on to power.
Right. And so, again, with the sort of Usual Suspects analogy, like things that felt like just a little quirkiness or kind of amusing, they don't seem so amusing anymore. This feels like part of a pattern that's a lot less funny. When I kind of, the story came into my lap and I started investigating it, like I was saying, it was amusing. I was like, get it, girl. Indulge yourself a little. You got the most boring job in the world, and you got a useless honorific to a meaningless degree. So, indulge yourself a little. Why not? Have a little fun with it. But, after one thing after another, and then, watching as the president essentially is being dragged around a semi-lifeless corpse on the campaign trail, this stuff isn't really amusing anymore. It's actually starting to feel pretty dark. And pretty depressing.
Have you begun to see any questions about Jill's role from the traditional press corps at all? Because I feel like there are questions right now about the health lies that the White House has been telling, and certainly the health of the President of the United States and the likeliness of him staying on as the nominee. Those are all in bounds. But at the moment, I'm not seeing much of a turn against Jill by the press corps.
Not yet. There's a very small drip. Like, for instance, it was revealed either last night or this morning that she has been sitting in on some pretty high-level meetings with her husband, and has been for quite a while now, which raises the obvious question: what sort of security clearance does she have? But then there's the other question of, why is she in these meetings? Does this fall under her purview? Is this normal? No, it's not normal. First Lady generally doesn't, join the president in the Situation Room for these sort of things.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to be seeing a little bit more. I mean, a lot of this depends on how this election turns out. If Joe Biden loses, the people who've been leaking, the sort of torrent of leaks about his health and him falling asleep at European summits, et cetera, the people who've been leaking that, I guarantee you, they have a very thick dossier on Jill Biden that they are just sitting on right now. Right now, it's a very small drip. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like right now the effort to sort of pressure Joe off the campaign trail is losing steam.
Yes.
But if it comes to a Hail Mary pass or desperation, they might start going after her directly in terms of the pressure campaign.
It strikes me that the person with the most incentive in the world to leak Jill's current behavior right now is Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris would like to be the president of the United States. She would certainly like to be the nominee. At the moment, her public presentation is that she stands with Joe, because what else is she going to say? But it's not a secret, Becket Adams, that the two women do not like each other. In fact, it's been reported pretty extensively since the beginning of the administration that Jill Biden really resents that Kamala Harris portrayed her husband as a racist during the 2020 primary, and she's never lived that down.
Yeah, well, in terms of rumors and whispers in the White House, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris apparently don't quite get along, but which isn't new. George W. and Dick Cheney for a long time were kind of on the outs over Scooter Libby. So it's not unusual for a president and his vice president to sort of be on the outs, but I think there's a personal element here between the Bidens and the Harris clans. And I think the way things are going now, I mean, in a weird way, it's almost comforting if Kamala and her team are the ones responsible for the leaks, because it's very cunning and very clever, and that's not something I thought they were capable of. So I'm like, all right, look, if they're going to ascend the throne in Joe Biden's place, at least, someone who's cunning and clever. That's more than I could expect or hope for at this point. So that's the best I can do. But yeah, I think, whomever is responsible for this and who's been, I mean, you've seen it since the debate. It's just a torrent of insider information. All of these things, there are anecdotes from Biden's behavior from 2022 that we're just now hearing about. So somebody or some person or some team just has a mountain of information that they're giving to everyone. And that's the other thing, too, if you've noticed as part of the strategy. It's not just one reporter. It's not like, say, Maggie Haberman has the inside scoop.
Yeah.
Everyone is getting a piece of the pie. Reuters, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, everyone's getting exclusive scoops. And so it's just a shotgun blast at this point. And I guarantee you the person who has all this dirt or all these unflattering anecdotes about the president, they have an equal amount, or maybe not equal, but they certainly have a dossier on the wife, on Jill, who she will, if they lose, she will bear a lot of blame for having sort of forced the issue and instead of kind of, consulting her husband and talking him out of it, et cetera, playing such a pivotal role, which she has been. Whether she's tweeting out pictures of herself claiming she's preparing for the G7 summit, or stuff like having her own Hail to the Chief, or her appearing on the campaign trail and taking such a forward role on this, and in places where, again, it's not normal for a First Lady to be there, like in the Situation Room at these high-level meetings. She will catch a lot of hell if they lose, and I guarantee that people who are doing the leaking now have plenty of stuff to say about her, and you will hear it.
I believe it. Becket Adams, who has every job in the world. Thank you, sir. Good to talk to you today.
Thanks, Vince.
Becket
Appreciate
Adams. Yeah, he's with everybody. National Review, Washington Examiner. He does it all. It's amazing, isn't it? Let's see. Jim is in Winchester on line 3. Jim, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, how you doing today, sir?
Doing good, Jim.
A lot of people might not recognize that introduction song, but I think it was picked with intention. The F Troop, she is all part of the troop that is effing us.
Oh, so maybe that's why they picked it. Yeah, that could add up. I am wondering what the message is. So your guess is as good as mine.
I think it's very appropriate.
Thank you, Jim. So Jim noticed here that F Troop. There may be a message in this. This again, just so people can hear it once again. If you missed this, this is Becket Adams was among the first, I think the only really, who reported that Jill Biden was given her own intro music. Somebody at the White House demanded it. The Marine Band came up with this in a jiffy, and here's what it sounded like back when they would air it in 2021.
and Juliana Urtubey.
All right, and here's the F Troop intro. A little faster pace. I don't know. I mean, it is the same music. That's pretty funny. Let's see here. Mark in Manassas, line 5. Mark, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Great to have you back. I was going to say the same thing that Jim said. The first thing that popped into my mind was FJB. I bet it was an intentional and kind of subtle dig, at the first family that they thought might fly under the radar that didn't.
I'm thinking about this. When did Let's Go Brandon become popular? Because that was around, but by that time, people were saying FJB. That's actually what the woman at a NASCAR race, she misheard FJB, and she said, "Let's go Brandon." Oh, here, look. It's October of 2021, so that's consistent. This was in 2021 that phrase was already becoming popularized. So you may be onto something here.
I think they knew exactly what they were doing.
How about it? All right, Mark, thank you very much. Let's see. I've got William in Silver Spring on line 4. William, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Yeah, I want to know, Vince, why there's no national outrage that with the American economy and the people hurting this country the way it is, why they're spending taxpayers' money and the U.S. military to draft for a personal song.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a sign of their decadence and their lack of care about the very issues you brought up.
Where's the Washington Post and ABC News now? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. No, this is Becket Adams gave us this. This was the conservative press that was reporting on this, and I'm ashamed I didn't even really know about it until now. But the reason it's coming up, of course, is because of Jill Biden's ludicrous public behavior trying to hold on to power here. And somebody pointed out, she had her own intro music, her own Hail to the Chief made up. And I was like, really? She did? And it was Becket who broke all that news.
But Vince, this is reminiscent of the Soviet Politburo, remember, in the 1970s.
Mm-hmm. In their decadence and their lack of concern about the people who were dying and standing in bread lines. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, William. Yeah, this is typical of these lefty regimes. All right, hold on. All right, let's go to the phones. We've got Donna calling in from Frederick on line 1. Donna, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, good afternoon. That F Troop music cracks me up.
Isn't that unbelievable?
I just love our military. They get everything, man. I just love it. But I was going to say to you, the thing that I find most outrageous right now with, everybody knows cringe has been lying. They've been lying forever.
Yeah.
But the other ones who are, who are participants of the whole charade are the rest of the press. They're acting as if they're washing their hands of everything else when they know darn well that Joe Biden has been this way for a very long time. And it's not just conservatives who've been aware of it. The left has been fully aware of it, especially those in the media industrial complex.
Yeah, it's funny. It was NBC's Kelly O'Donnell, I think it was about a week ago. It was after the debate. She had asked in the White House press briefing, she's like, is there anybody in the White House who has been covering up the president's condition? She asked Karine Jean-Pierre. And I paused the audio, Donna, and I said, yeah, the White House press corps. The White House press corps sits right there in the White House each day. They've seen this guy. Just like the rest of us, they haven't asked these probing questions. In fact, CNN had a big report written by a media reporter called Hadass Gold. She went and spoke to a bunch of these White House correspondents who anonymously told her, yeah, we didn't want to really talk about it. We knew it was true, but we didn't want to feed into a right-wing narrative. So they took a pass because of party politics. So yeah, if you're ever wondering, why did they all do a heel turn at the same moment? Just remember, it's party politics. Biden is an impediment to power, and you got to keep power. Stay with us. I've got some details on the Democrat debate as you have lawmakers who are literally crying now in meetings with one another, unsure of what to do. How can we hold on to power with the demented guy in charge?